There we
Recording
are.
has.
Okay, so welcome everybody to this open event for the MRes in Biomedical Research at Imperial College. This is an open event for only part of that master's course, the data science and EECID streams. And we've got a number of different people to talk to you today. We should take no more than an hour. So fingers crossed we can get done in that time, and there will be a chance for you to ask questions. If you think of things you want to ask during the first part of the meeting, please put any questions in the chat or put up your hand and we will try and come to you. We've also had a few questions that people have asked in advance, so we'll probably start with those. So my name's Tim Ebbels, and I'm the lead of this master's degree. We also have Dr. Joram Posma and Valentina. Oh, I'm sorry, Valentina, I'm going to mess up your name. So Joram co-leads the data science stream with me, and Valentina is one of our previous data science students who's now studying for a PhD. And we also have on the EECID stream, that's the epidemiology stream, Dr. Lucy O'Kell, Dr. Isabel Blake, who lead that stream, and one of our previous students, Lanre Edon, who is also studying for a PhD, having done the master's previously. So let me just see if I can advance the slides. Why is it not advancing? Not sure what's going on. Okay, so this is what we have for you. We'll just do a very brief introduction to each of us, and then I'll introduce you to the master's program itself, of which these two streams are a part. Then Joram will talk about the data science stream. Lucy and Isabel will talk about the epidemiology stream, and then we'll have some comments from our previous students, Valentina and Lanre, and then we'll move on to our question and answer session in the second half of the meeting. So just a bit about me. I'm a professor of biomedical data science here. I've been working in this area for about 25 years, and I've got lots of different interests, essentially applying machine learning, statistics, and mathematical modeling to biomedical data, primarily molecular biomedical data from the so-called omics sciences. Don't worry if you're not sure what that is. I put in a few pretty pictures here, but we don't have time to go into them all. But that's the kind of thing I do. I'll move on to Joram.
All right, I'm a senior lecturer in the section that Tim leads, and my work is quite varied as well, from developing new methods to analyzing big data sets and coming up with different visualization techniques to show different types of data. So yeah, you can see some examples on the screen, but I suggest we just press on.
Okay. Valentina, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, so I'm Valentina. You can see my background here, but I have a background in bioinformatics, and then I specialize more in data science with the MRes, and now I'm actually doing a PhD, which is more in artificial intelligence and machine learning, applied to the field of computational neuroscience.
Great. Lucy, your turn.
Hi, I'm Lucy O'Kell. I work on malaria epidemiology and mathematical modelling. And the focus is really on data analysis and working with clinicians, public health agencies, and people who collect data in different settings, and using models to estimate malaria burden and the impact of different public health interventions to inform policy. Thanks.
Fantastic. Isabel?
Hello, I'm Isabel Blake. My research is focused on the analysis of global surveillance, outbreak and vaccination data with the aim to have direct relevance to policy and optimal allocation of interventions. Most of my work is focused working with the Global Polio Eradication Initiative. So we have collaborators with the World Health Organization, CDC, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And I've also worked on Ebola, neglected tropical diseases, and bovine TB, analysing the data using a selection of statistical and mathematical models. Thanks.
Okay, fantastic. And last but not least, Lanre, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, so hi everyone, my name is Lanre. So I have a medical background. After working for a while in clinical medicine, I then switched to public health. I did the MRes EECID stream in 2019 and started a PhD right afterwards in 2020.
Excellent, thanks very much. So now that you guys know who we all are, I'll just spend a little bit of time introducing you to the master's program itself. And as I say, the master's is broken up into a number of streams, and we're talking about two of those streams here today. So firstly, a little bit about Imperial College. As you may know, Imperial is one of the leading universities in the world. Its focus is on science, technology, medicine, and business. It's also known as one of the most international universities in the UK, perhaps the most international. So we have a very large number of international students from all over the world. We're highly ranked, as I already mentioned, in terms of the World University Rankings, whether you take that across all subjects or just in sort of biomedicine, for instance. We're not a huge university compared to some around the world. We have about 17,000 students and 8,000 staff from 125 countries. About half our students are postgraduates, and about half of those are doing masters. We award many thousands of degrees each year, including nearly 2,000 PhDs. That statistic is a little out of date now, and we have a large amount of money spent on research in biomedicine every year as well. In terms of the masters itself, there's a big pressure on places. So the application to places ratio is around 4 or 5 to 1 every year. It varies, of course, from year to year. So anybody who gets a place on this masters is really at the top of the tree. We're based in the middle of London. There are a number of different campuses around central London. What you see here is the South Kensington campus, an aerial view there on the left, and a few nice photos in the spring and in the winter on the right. That's the main campus. We also have, that's one of the buildings inside one of the medical buildings at the South Ken campus. We also have St Mary's Hospital, where a lot of research goes on. That's well known as the place where Sir Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin, the first antibiotic, about 100 years ago. We also have Hammersmith Hospital, which is a real hotbed of research in biomedicine, and has been a big training ground for new medical students for decades. So the MRes is a master's degree, and not everybody here may be clear on exactly how those work in the UK and at Imperial. So I just thought I would show you how those things happen. There are two different types of master's degrees. There's an MSc and an MRes. So an MSc is primarily composed of taught material, so lectures, tutorials, practicals, etc., assessed by exams. And then there's usually a research project, which accounts for about 1/3 of the degree. An MRes, on the other hand, has a much larger research component. And so a typical MRes might look like this, where we have a much sort of 2/3, for instance, around it in the research project, and only, say, 1/3 in lectures and exams. Our MRes, in contrast, has an even larger research component. So almost all of the teaching is done through research projects. And although there is a component that's lectures and tutorials, etc., those are a much smaller component than in some other MReses. So most of the time is spent doing research on our program. The aims of the program are to give students a broad research training to prepare for a career in biomedical research. We can break that down into a number of different objectives, which emphasize, obviously, the background, the actual science, the chemical, biological, and computational aspects, the investigative or experimental approach, and also theoretical and practical skills. If you come and do this MRes, this is what you'll be doing during the year. Starting on the left in October, that's the beginning of the academic year in the UK. There's an induction period, and you spend most of that time deciding what project you'd like to do for your first project. You spend the next 5 to 6 months doing that project, and it's assessed at the end of that period in March, with both a written thesis and an oral presentation as in the form of a poster. Then you spend the next half of the year doing your second project. And again, that's assessed in September with a thesis and an oral presentation. During that first half of that project too, you're also learning how to write grants. So you'll submit a simulated grant application as part of that exercise. And finally, at the end of the year in September, there's a final viva voce examination. So that's an oral examination with expert examiners like you might have in a PhD, but obviously it's a little bit shorter than a PhD viva. The MRes, as I said, is broken up into a number of different streams. I'm showing them here, and I'm not going to go into details at all. There are 8 separate streams. They have a common set of teaching, which is this core program, as we call it, training in things like statistics, bioinformatics, grant writing, etc. They also have very specific lectures and tutorials that are specific to their own areas. Here, we're talking about these two streams, the data science streams and the epidemiology, evolution and control of infectious diseases, or EECID stream. If we ask previous students how they found the course, here is a sort of word cloud summarizing what they said. So they thought that it was challenging, it was interesting, it was all about research, and it's very practical. Many people who apply to this course want to go on to do further research, and obviously a main vehicle for doing that is to go on to a PhD. And I just thought I'd show you a few quick statistics on how many people tend to do that from our MRes. As you can see, over the course of the last sort of 10 to 15 years, we've had more and more students going on to do PhDs. And out of around 700 or 100 people that have been trained since the course began, with probably about 2/3 of them have gone on to do PhD. So it's a very high hit rate for PhD progression. But don't forget, it's not all about studying. There's plenty of other things to do here at Imperial. I'm just showing a few pictures from the clubs and societies that exist. And hopefully outside of the time that you spend on your research and the lectures and things, you'll have time to get involved in some of those things. Okay, so that's a brief overview, and I'm going to hand over to Yoram now to talk about the data science stream in particular.
Yeah. So in the data science stream, as Tim mentioned, there's these big research projects that run from October to March and March to September. But on every Wednesday, we have different teaching sessions. So these usually these are face-to-face. Sometimes they are in teams. This year we've had a few of those because of train strikes. But what we tend to do is we on the morning lectures, there's about 2-hour slots where we talk about different topics throughout the year. So those are weekly lectures as well. And every other Wednesdays, we have bioinformatics meetups where students come in, but also other staff as well to talk about different topics. There will be seminars given and so on. And also as part of the program, there's student-led journal clubs as well. And I'm going to talk about each of these individually a little bit more in detail. So throughout the year, you get a whole range of different lectures as part of the data science MRes stream. And with these type of things, you'll get exposed to a whole range of different topics. Some of them might be directly relevant to the first project you're doing or the second one. What we aim to do is give you quite a broad view of the things that you might encounter later on in a career in data science. These bioinformatics meetups, so this is a sectional meeting of the section of bioinformatics that Tim leads. And we get speakers from within the section, we get speakers from other departments at Imperial, and also external speakers as well. And it's attended by a whole range of different people that all participate in these sessions. And just to give you an idea of previous speakers and topics that we've had, goes from speakers from other universities in the UK and around the world, and as well as some former students. So one of them is now a PhD student, a former data science student who gave a presentation, and more recently a former MRes student who now works at AstraZeneca who gave a presentation as well. So it's quite broad and varied, a lot of different topics that'll allow you to interact with people and also build a network that way. So just for people, if they're on the call and if they're interested, if you are in London, the next one is on the 1st of February. And it's free for all, and there's now you can come along if you want to see this, and we have two different speakers on that day as well. So the other part of the program throughout the year is journal clubs, where each of the students, they will lead one topic, and they will choose their own paper in data science. And with there's a small group of the presenting team, they all highlight different aspects. And the other students there, they prepare questions for them. So you can see the 2 journal clubs we've had so far this year. They've chosen quite a different sets of paper, and it's really up to the student what they want to talk about as well. So because the MRes has quite a big component of research projects, we wanted to show you some ideas of what students have done in the last year. So we've asked them something they're proud of, something that they really liked in their project, something they wanted to highlight to you. So I'm just going to go through a few of them. So this is one project on natural language processing, where one of the students has developed an algorithm that did better in recognizing what is an enzyme in a piece of text than previous methods. Another student using imaging data of micro-CT imaging data of fruit flies, and trying to model the different compartments that can be seen on each of those images from both female and male flies, but also reproductive females and virgin female flies, because these are different. And this was using a deep learning pipeline that they tried to do the segmentation automatically. In the same way, there's a bit more of a genomics focus on different data using electronic health record data as well. We're trying to see if we can characterize different populations of patients based on this type of omic data, and using different techniques to summarize that and to show different clusters in the data. And the last example we show is again, it's a bit on electronic health records and imaging, trying to create a computational model that can predict different parts of the data using labels from the text. So this is quite a wide variety of different projects, and Valentina will later discuss her project during the MRes as well. So we'll hand over now to Lucy and Isabel.
Thank you. So if you choose the EECID stream, the epidemiology stream, you'll be based within the Department of Infectious Disease Epidemiology, which is part of the School of Public Health at Imperial. And we thought we'd just give you a flavour of the different research that goes on within the department so that you can see what kind of projects you might work on. So the research is divided into 5 themes. There's outbreak analysis and modelling. For example, all the work the department did, led by Neil Ferguson, on COVID-19. Also have looked at analysing Ebola outbreaks. And then there's the global health analytics themes, looking at the burden of different diseases such as malaria, HIV, tuberculosis, and assessing the cost effectiveness and impact of different interventions. There's the vaccine themes, working on analysing efficacy and effectiveness data pre-post clinical trials. There's the antimicrobial resistance theme, looking at assessing how antimicrobial resistance emerges, it spreads, and how to mitigate antimicrobial resistance. And then there's the method and tools theme, which is really the computational section, working out how to improve ways to analyze epidemiological data and how to translate those methods into statistical packages so that they can be used more widely by public health bodies. So if you're interested, I would recommend you to look at these 2 links at the bottom of the page. The one on the left gives the overview of the research that's done within the department. You can see all the different infections that we work on listed on the right. And then the link on the right-hand side shows some very nice short YouTube clips where researchers are giving an update on recent research they've been doing that's had impact. So it's a nice way for you to get a flavour of what kind of work is being done. Thank you.
Great. So I'm moving on to the MRes specifically as to what you would be learning on the epidemiology stream. We do take students from quite a range of different backgrounds. So biomedical backgrounds are common, whether that's biology, biochemistry, biomedical science. We also have students from kind of physics backgrounds or mathematical backgrounds, statistical. So it's really a whole range of backgrounds is suitable for this program. So because everyone's kind of starting from a different point, we provide training in programming. So R is the most commonly used software in the department. We also look at infectious disease modelling methods. So probably since the COVID-19 pandemic, some of you would have heard of SIR models, which are used to track susceptible, infected and recovered people over time and try and understand how transmission might look going forwards and what's happened in the past. We also have sort of introductory statistics and then moving on to more complex methods like Bayesian methods and using likelihood for model fitting. We do have lecturers as well working on population genetics, phylogenomics, so using genomic information to understand how diseases are spreading and evolving, and also spatial epidemiology, or how to infer maps of different diseases. And then lastly, we have kind of disease-specific lectures as well. So just like the data science stream, these would be sessions on a Wednesday morning. To give you a flavour of past epidemiology projects, we've got a few examples here. So last year, YEFIS was looking at COVID transmission in the UK using quite detailed geographic data and estimating whether vaccination, as well as reducing disease, is actually reducing transmission as well. And she came up with this number as it's reducing transmission by about a quarter across the UK using Bayesian methods. Oliver Watson looked at the spread of resistance to diagnostics in malaria. Malaria has managed to evolve not only drug resistance, but even resistance to diagnostics we use to detect it, which is a real problem. And he published his work in eLife as well. So we do have students quite regularly who manage to publish either one or both of their projects. This was using individual-based, so agent-based modeling, we call it. Hadrian was looking at a wave of unexplained kind of respiratory syncytial virus infections in Italian hospitals, and he was able to show using modeling of immunity that was because children during lockdowns had not been exposed to this virus before. And some more of a spatial focused project using spatial mixed effects regression methods. Victoria was able to explain the spatial spread of hand, foot and mouth disease in Malaysia, also looking at data on how people travel around the country and where the urban centres are. Next one. And lastly, more of a kind of traditional epidemiology project, perhaps, which is a systematic review and meta-analysis by Catherine Davis, looking at the association between HIV treatments and hypertension, and also factors that slow down care seeking for hypertension. So that's just to give you a flavour of all the different methods that might be used. Many of the advanced statistical methods were used by students with a biomedical background, so you could see they came quite far during the year in terms of learning all the statistical methods. We aim our MRes students to be integrated well into the department, so we have desks for the students here and kind of encourage students to go to communal kitchens for lunch and also come to research seminars, which we have twice a week with external speakers. And we also have kind of department social with refreshments and internal speakers on another day. Thank you. And now I'll let you move on to the students to hear more from their perspective.
Right. So I think it's Lanre first. Would you like to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so I will just talk through my two projects and what I'm doing now. So I came onto the program with zero experience in programming. I had never used R prior to starting the MRes. But I was really keen to learn and also develop skills in mathematical modeling. And so for my very first project, I picked up a project that involved mainly statistical modeling and linking data using R. And so I didn't just dive into the deep end with modeling. So I had time to learn through the 6 months. There was a lot of support in the department. And so the project really involved using data from South Africa to identify sources of bias in using clinical data compared to population cohort data to estimate viral suppression. And so I was thinking of what figure to put from the project just to sort of highlight what I did. But I think for me, like the most fun part was preparing this poster at the end of the project. So the assessment is based on the written thesis and a poster presentation, which really I think was quite useful because now I'm doing my PhD. I have a poster presentation in the US next month, and I'm quite confident going into it because I've done this during the MRes already. Next slide, please. Okay, so for my second project, after having picked up the skills in using R, I did a mathematical modeling project. And so this project was aimed to identify indicators to help predict elimination of hepatitis B according to the WHO thresholds. And so we simulated 10,000 runs of a mathematical model, sort of using different scenarios to identify what settings would reach elimination and what indicators had the best prediction to identify this. And this project really involved collaborations with colleagues at the WHO. As part of it, I actually did join the WHO interim guidance meeting, which was very, very cool. And so like we're currently working to publish this as well. Next slide. So yeah, right after the MRes, I started my PhD. So I'm co-supervised by Jeff Eaton, who was my MRes first project supervisor. I'm also supervised by Lucy O'Kell, who's equally on the call, who were like extremely helpful during my MRes and sort of guided me through starting the PhD. My PhD project really involves identifying determinants of HIV treatment success amongst young people living with HIV, and also using mathematical modeling to quantify contribution of different subgroups of people living with HIV to new transmissible infections. Really, I just have to round up saying that I think the MRes has been extremely useful in my PhD journey because I made a lot of friends who are currently in my PhD cohort. I've also developed a lot of skills which I use on my PhD day-to-day, analytic skills, presentation skills, and much more. Thanks.
Thanks. And then I think, Valentina, it's your turn.
Yes, so can you go to the next slide? I think, yeah. So during the MRes, I actually, I worked on 2 projects that were quite different. The first project consisted on implemented deep learning to detect cancer in histological images. And I guess the important thing is that when I started the MRes, I did have experience in programming, but I didn't have any experience on deep learning and either in working with imaging. So the first project did teach me a lot. And then in the second project, instead, I changed completely field. I was really interested in neuroscience. I didn't have a background in neuroscience, but still I had the possibility to kind of organize my own project, contact a supervisor and do a project in which I still use deep learning, but this time to predict Alzheimer progression, working on multimodal data and on completely different type of images. So I'm just going to give you like kind of an example of the results of my first project. So here, essentially, what you can see is that I had a lot of histology images, and what the deep learning algorithm could do is that it could detect exactly where in the image the tumor was located. I think the fact that the project went very well. We do have 2 publications out of this project. It kind of interesting even more to kind of know more about deep learning and anything. I guess the point I wanted to make is that after this one, I didn't end up doing a PhD immediately. I actually ended up doing a research assistant, research technician job. The reason was that I got a couple of PhD offers during the PhD, but I wanted to learn more about neuroscience. So the MRes gave me the opportunity to learn about this new field, and I wanted to extend my knowledge in it. So I started to work as a research assistant in the field of computational neuroscience. So I used, again, some of the example projects that I worked last year on. I used AI to predict, for example, the predicted Parkinson and multiple sclerosis. I also did modeling. So I learned a new skill during the research assistant job, and I started to do modeling to predict motor and cognitive impairment. And then I also did some more like clustering analysis to kind of identify different stages and subtypes of depression and anxiety. And during the research assistant job, then I applied to new PhDs, and then now I started a PhD in which I essentially combine all the things I learned in the MRes and things I learned during the research assistant job, and apply AI specifically to different neurodegenerative diseases.
Great, thank you, Valentina and Lanre. That's, I think, very helpful for the new students or potential new students to hear your experiences. So what we're going to do now is go through some of the questions that have been submitted in advance, and we will attempt to get the right person to answer the question, but it might take more than one comment to get the answer, shall we say. So we've got, what, 10 or 15 questions here. So apologies if we don't get to yours in the time available. We have about 25 minutes left, so we'll do our best. Right, so let's start at the top. We have some questions around admissions. So the first one is, and by the way, these are all anonymous. We don't know who submitted what, so we're not going to be identifying people. The first question is, can I pursue this course with a BSc in biochemistry? So perhaps we can have a comment from each of the streams. Yoram, do you want to comment for data science?
Yeah, so for data science, we'd more than welcome someone with a background in biochemistry. Of course, the MRes is biomedical research, so that's a very good background. For the data science team, we do typically look at students who have some experience already in coding, or at least a very good interest in coding. So if you do want to apply and you're interested in the data science stream, try to highlight that, what your experience is with coding.
And maybe Lucy or Isabel from the EECID point of view?
Sure, yeah, I actually have a background in biochemistry myself. So yeah, it's a very common background to have in our department. There is, as Yoram said, there's a similar transition to be made from that background to learning coding and more quantitative topics. So I think having some kind of mathematical background, or again, some coding experience, is an advantage when you're applying. Or at least kind of knowing, being sure somehow that you enjoy that kind of work, and that you'll enjoy doing that on a day-to-day basis. Yeah.
Excellent. And of course, biochemistry is an excellent background for most of the other streams on the program as well, not just these two. Okay, so next one. I have a bachelor's in mechanical engineering. And with some journal publications. Shall I apply to the program? Certainly mechanical engineering is a background that we would consider appropriate for the data science stream, because it has a strong component of coding and mathematical analysis. Journal publications on your CV always look nice, but we would be looking into these, you know, exactly what they were and, you know, what your input to them was when we evaluate your application. I don't know, again, whether Lucy and Isabel, you would consider mechanical engineering as an appropriate background?
I think a similar answer. It definitely shows evidence of computation and coding. You just have to show that you're interested in infectious disease epidemiology, applying those skills to a new field.
That's right.
Yeah, so I think I would just add to that, the same for the data science stream. It is biomedical research, so even if you haven't done it, at least show your interest in sort of biomedical data in some way, and how you might have been exposed to that. Another question I was asked is the time range for an offer. So I will sort of take the next question as well. When do applications open for international prospects? They are open right now. So you can apply at any time, from usually in the year from November onwards. So what happens is you'll apply, you'll send in your application. That will get reviewed internally by stream leads and other people, and then a decision will be made for a potential offer, and on certain conditions as well. So usually I would say you would be able to expect to hear something in the time range of a week or 2, or maybe 3-4 weeks, and then you'll hear an outcome more generally.
Okay, and I see there's another question in the chat which relates to applications and admissions, asking about whether biotechnology is also an acceptable undergraduate, especially with extracurricular experience in bacterial STIs. So again, I imagine that's mainly towards the EECID stream, but from the point of view of data science, yes, I think we would consider that similarly appropriate. Lucy and Isabel, biotechnology?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very suitable undergrad. Again, it's at this stage, we don't kind of expect you to know everything, because you're coming to learn that here. So it's more about the motivation that you show for the topic, as well as just having some idea that you do enjoy this kind of work, and that you enjoy the research process, and you're happy kind of doing a kind of master's where you're researching more, you know, you have meetings with your supervisors, but you are spending a certain amount of time researching on your own and solving problems on your own. So kind of showing that you would enjoy that and kind of thrive in that environment.
And I think there's one more thing about a degree in the chat, which is somebody with a BS in computer engineering with some experience at the UK Health Security Agency. So again, I imagine the same sort of response would be right, that, well, okay, so in terms of appropriateness for the program, I think, you know, the same sort of comments would apply, and certainly if you've got relevant experience, showing your interest in whichever of the streams you're applying for, so public health, for instance, for epidemiology, or data science in the biomedical arena for the data science stream, that's appropriate. That person is also asking whether we would consider the application for a part-time program, and I think somebody else has also asked whether part-time is available. Unfortunately not. This is a full-time program over 12 months, starting in October and finishing in September. unfortunately, we're not able to offer part-time. The reasons for that are down mainly to the complexity of organizing projects over sort of part-time attendance and things like that. We find that students who are here, regularly working with other people on their projects, seeing their supervisors regularly, tend to have a much better progression than those students who are not able to do it, every day of the week, as it were. So unfortunately, part-time is not available. Okay, should we go back to the questions on the, yeah. Okay, so this may be one actually specific to EECID. The question is, are there any PhD scholarships related to EECID, particularly the EECID stream? So Lucy and Isabel.
Yeah, unfortunately, so we did used to have scholarships for this MRes program. Unfortunately, that ran out a couple of years ago. So we are looking to find more funding options, but it's quite limited at the moment from the UK side. We sometimes get applicants who are funded in their home countries from scholarships they've kind of applied for there, and then they'll use that to pay for the master's course here. But the answers for the MRes, unfortunately, no. For a PhD, there's a lot more options. I think, again, we could put the link in the chat to various programs that would be appropriate for the a PhD in epidemiology in the department, but that wouldn't include the MRes.
And maybe we should just say that, there are scholarship schemes at Imperial that do relate to masters in general, not specific to this MRes or the ECID stream, but there are a small number of scholarships that will fund 1-year study on a master's. For example, there's a Dean's scholarship program available in the Faculty of Medicine, so that's for any biomedical course. But they are hard to get, they're very, very competitive. So, those are the options. If you're interested in finding out about scholarships, Imperial has a scholarship search tool, I believe, on the website where you can search for scholarships that are appropriate for both your background and the program you want to study. So I suggest you go there. In fact, I think Valentina has just posted it in the chat. Thanks, Valentina. I noticed you had your hand up, Valentina. Did you want to say anything else?
No, I just wanted to say that there is this scholarship that can fund full tuition. Yeah. But I think they give 12 every year or something.
That's right. Those are the ones I was mentioning. Okay. What's next, Joran?
So the next question is, what jobs does this master degree lead to? So this, we can sort of talk about our own streams that we know from students. As Tim mentioned before, quite a lot of the students, they progress to do a PhD. This is also one of the ideas behind an MRes, that it will prepare you for a PhD. But there's also plenty of students who go other routes. So from the last couple of years in the data science stream, as I mentioned, one of the students, I'm just talking about different careers than a PhD. One student has started to work as a data science for AstraZeneca. 1 or 2 students have gone into consulting. There's at least 3 students that I know that are currently working for Huawei in China and different places, technology companies. There's a data science student who works as a data scientist for Marks and Spencer at the moment. So it's quite a wide range of careers of different students that go there. So I don't know, Lucy, Isabel, if you have other experiences, where do your students end up after the masters?
So primarily it's PhDs, because most of the MRes students on our stream had funding for the MRes plus the PhD. But following on from PhDs, or even after MRes, is the potential to, as well as working research, is to work for, say, the World Health Organization or UK or country public health institutes or pharmaceutical companies. So there's quite a range of outside of academia jobs that you could work for, and even outside of epidemiology, you could work in the finance industry with the analysis skills that you develop.
Okay, great. So we are trying to follow the questions in the chat and on the pre-submitted ones. So again, apologies if we miss anything, but we'll try and do our best.
I think we just talked a little bit about careers after. So one person in the chat said they're currently doing a master's degree, and whether it would be needed to take an MRes course before applying for a PhD at Imperial. No, not necessarily. So the one thing is, what can an MRes offer over a Master of Science is some more research experience, especially also get you in touch with academics at Imperial that allow you to develop a project. But if you do know people, or if you do know a specific scheme that allows you to apply for your own funding and pick your supervisors, that's something that you can do. You can even do that for some extent from an undergraduate degree. The point of the MRes is really to prepare you for that next step where there as well.
I think a related question from the chat that's just been asked is whether there are any preliminary steps before applying, such as contacting possible supervisors in the department for projects of interest. That is something that you're free to do, but it's not required. So if you're interested and you want to apply, you can just apply, just fill in the application form. If you want to find out more, you're very welcome to contact people in the departments that are doing interesting things. You can see from their web pages, and it might be from those contacts, you come up with some possible places you might want to do a project. But as I say, it's not required. In terms of choosing the projects and getting set up with a project, that's something we do in the first couple of weeks of the program, where we send out a very long list of projects that are being offered. The students have a look at that, they talk to potential supervisors, and then we make an allocation of students to those projects based on the students' preferences. So we try to maximize the projects that the students want to do. So that's how it works in terms of choosing the projects, and it's not necessary to set something up in advance, although it's not prohibited. Okay.
So there was one question submitted in advance, is whether what the working situation is like during a project. So Isabel and Lucy mentioned there are spaces for students there during their projects. In the data science stream, it's usually what we do is in collaboration with the students. So what does the student prefer? There's always going to be hot desks available that the students can come into the departments of where the supervisors are and work, but they are free to work remotely if they wish. However, for the teaching part of this component, that is face-to-face. So we would expect the students to be there as well. But there are places where you can work at the university.
That's right. So that's one thing to emphasize. There is weekly teaching, one morning per week. So just a couple of hours or 2 or 3 hours on a Wednesday morning, you'd be coming in every week during that year to meet the rest of your class. You'd have a teaching session, whether that be a lecture or a tutorial or some other type of teaching. And that is face-to-face now. Obviously, we had to do it online during the pandemic, but we're back to face-to-face. That applies across the whole program. Occasionally, we have to do online teaching for one reason or another, but vast majority is face-to-face. And when it comes to project supervision, as I say, on both of these streams, quite a lot of the research is computational, so it's possible to do remotely, but you will be required to meet your supervisor in person most of the time, I would imagine. So there will be quite a lot of face-to-face interaction. Isabel or Lucy, do you want to comment on that at all?
Sure, yeah. So very similar answer here, really. Yeah, students do a mixture of working from home and coming in for meetings. Yeah, we do encourage kind of spending a bit of time in the department, just because we find that students kind of chat in the kitchen and they get to meet like PhD students, for example, who sometimes can help them learn some of the coding skills that they may have recently learned themselves, or we find that they kind of have quite a good peer support. So that's one of the bonuses of coming in. But yeah, it varies a lot on the student preference, and there's space here if people want to use it. We also have a computing cluster, for example, which some people need for their projects if they're computationally demanding. Yep.
Okay,
great. Just scanning through the chat here. Maybe we want to do.
We have one pre-submitted question still. Are there any collaboration possibilities between innovation design engineering students and biomedical research students? So one of the things that can be done in the MRes is to sort of arrange your own project as well. So if you know a supervisor that you'd like to work with, you can contact them, and together with them, you can come up with your own project. So I know for example, Valentina has done this before, where she wanted to learn something specific, wasn't sure if there was going to be a project offered, and she decided to do that herself to seek out that opportunity. So in terms of collaborating with other students, this is something within Imperial. You can get in touch with them through different societies, as Tim mentioned as well. You can interact with different students that way as well. So I don't know, Valentina, how did you find organizing your own project? Was that something simple for you to do, easy, or what were the steps that you took to do that?
Yeah, so I think you just have to take some time. So you need to spend quite a lot of time looking into the research that's going on at Imperial to be sure that the supervisor that you are going to contact is actually doing the research you're interested in. Then I do suggest you not to write a really simple, like, do spend some effort writing the email when you contact the supervisor, do put your CV in CC, ask to maybe have a talk to see what project he can offer, because you have to think that when you choose the project, it's not only about you choosing it's not only about the supervisor choosing you, but you also have to choose the supervisor, because maybe you realize after meeting the supervisor in person that you don't really get on well. Most of the supervisors are really nice. Some people never reply, which is normal. So in that case, I would suggest to recontact the supervisor after a week or 2 weeks, and if they still don't reply, in what I did have a backup plan. I definitely found it much easier to organize my own project for the second project rotation than the first one, because I thought the first was good to choose from the project list. You have a lot of projects to choose from, and you don't really know what you might like or might be interested in. So you can take that as an opportunity during the first project to kind of learn new things. And the second project, there are many more supervisors that are more willing to supervise a master thesis. So it's more like a standard format to supervise from the second project rotation from March, rather than supervise from October, which is more unusual. So it was easier for me to find a professor for the second project rotation. And actually the professor that I did my second project rotation with, I contacted him for my first project rotation. He never replied, but he did reply for my second project rotation. So yes, I would say just do very well your research, and it's doable. So don't think you don't stand a chance.
Landre, what was your experience with choosing projects, and how did you find that?
So at the Department of Infectious Epidemiology, there is like a very large list of projects. I think they sort of cater to every skill set. And the projects are like very, very clear. So it sort of outlines what you need to, what experience would be useful coming to that project, and then what your expectations would be. And so like there's also a project open day. It's like a project fair where the supervisors come and like they just, hang around and you can talk to them. So I had the chance to talk to like different people about concerns that I had coming to the project. And then just to also mention, like, there is a lot of support, because that's one thing that I came in with very little programming experience. And so I had a lot of concern. But then like I was made to sort of understand that you're not going to be thrown to the deep end. Like there's a lot of support. And one of the things I would like to add as well is that, so because it's like a research focused institution, you are sort of embedded into research teams. So you're not working alone. So I had the opportunity to work with postdocs, other PhD students who were like years ahead of me. And so even when you're struggling with a part of your project, there's always someone you can sort of meet up with. And then aside from the Wednesdays, which we have classes, you also sort of have your lab meetings. So like your supervisor would likely have regular meetings every week. So like in my own group, my first project, we always had like a meeting on Monday morning where you present one slide on something you're struggling with, which I found very useful. So I think like there's a lot of projects to pick from. And like, no matter what your experience is, you will definitely find something useful.
Great. So anything else on that?
I think there's one more question that's quite specific, which was pre-submitted. So what is the role of biomedical research in breast carcinoma? How can we play our role through it? So one of the things is that there's a whole range of projects that's being submitted, and some of these will relate to cancer biology and some specifically to breast carcinoma. So this can be investigated via so many different means. This can be investigated through genomics analysis or proteomics or metabolomics, transcriptomics. There might be other things as well there. At the same time, if you're truly interested in breast cancer research, there's plenty of breast cancer researchers at Imperial as well. So if there's not a project in that you would like, but you will be able to then contact supervisors for another rotation to say, okay, can we come up with a project? I'm really interested in this. So sort of along the lines that Valentina mentioned and Lanre mentioned as well, talk with supervisors at a project fair or send them an email. And that's how you might be able to arrange different topics. Valentina?
Yeah, just a quick comment that actually my project was on breast cancer. And there were like a few projects on this topic. Actually, I was using deep learning to be able to diagnose it, to detect it. But as Jerome said, there are different things you can do, but my project was specifically on that, for example.
And just to say again, we're focusing on two streams here, which are mainly computational or mathematical research. But of course, the broader program has another 50 or 60 students probably doing lab-based research, and many of those will be working on cancer-based problems. So there's a big sort of interchange, there's a huge network of people working on different things, but there's commonalities and overlaps. So it might be that you end up working in a lab on a computational project, but where there are other students and postdocs also working on lab-based things. So you know, you're not necessarily going to be isolated just doing computational stuff and not finding out about other aspects of biomedical research. The idea is to sort of immerse yourself in a research environment where you can get input across a really broad range of different ways of doing the research. And another aspect to emphasize about that is that we encourage students to do their two projects in two different labs. So across the year, you would get obviously two different scientific problems to work on, but more importantly than that, you would get input and supervision from different teams. So perhaps in one project, you might work in a very large group where the supervisor has a lot of people working with them. Perhaps you don't see your main supervisor very often, but you'll get a lot of input from postdocs and PhD students, for instance. And perhaps in another project, you might work in a smaller group where you see the main supervisor every day. And it's a very different kind of working environment. And if you're thinking of going on to do a PhD, that can really help you understand, you know, what works best for you, how you react to those different research environments, and you know, how you feel that you could best progress when you go on to do that that next step. So it's not just about learning the science, this program. It's largely about learning the techniques and the methods, but also understanding how research works and yeah, how it can relate to your specific experience. Okay, we did have one other question submitted in advance, which we're a little bit unsure about, which the question just says the AECOM workstream. So AECOM, capital letters, workstream. We're not sure quite what that question was intended to ask, whether it was just asking about some of the streams. AECOM is not one of our MRes streams, so we're not quite sure if that person was referring to something else. If you did ask that question, we'd be very happy for you to explain what you meant, either in the chat, or you're very welcome to unmute and talk about it. Otherwise, you know, feel free to clarify in an email to myself or any of the other program team later, and we can get back to you with more information. Okay, and we've just had a little bit of conversation about spirituality in the chat. I think that's something that will not be specific to our programs. So obviously the spiritual life of students and staff at Imperial is something that is, you know, important. And as Noelia put in the chat earlier on, there is a chaplaincy service which covers many different faiths, and you know, Imperial is an inclusive and open society of students and staff, and there's no you know, preference for any particular background, etc. So, but those kinds of questions, I think, are applicable to any program at Imperial. It's not something that we would be able to answer specifically related to this program of study. So if you've got further questions about those sorts of things, then again, feel free to forward them to us, and we'll try and help with those as much as we can outside of this meeting. So I think we've kind of used up our time. Is there any further questions anybody wants to ask that we haven't addressed already? We're just scanning again through the chat. I don't see too much. Yep, I think as far as I can see, we've addressed pretty much the things which were asked either in advance or in the chat. So I'll give you one more moment to put anything in the chat if you want.
Or quickly put up your hand if it takes a bit longer to ask.
Yes, feel free to put up your hand. Otherwise, I think we're going to draw this to a close and say thank you very much for attending. It's great to see a few people interested in the programme. Please do look at the website for more information. If you've got very specific questions you can't find answers to there, then as I say, feel free to drop us a line. And ultimately, we look forward to seeing applications. We will be holding probably other sessions like this for more information, and the information on those will come out in due course, either on the website or via other communications channels. So I think what we can do now is probably close the session. As I say, thank you for coming. We'll stop the recording, and perhaps we'll meet some of you in the future.